Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. One late afternoon, just as Mr. Hone finished the last meeting of the day, his phone vibrated. An old name appeared on the screen, someone he had not been in contact with for many years. The call was brief, no small talk, no detours, just a few short sentences, enough for Mr. Hone to understand that something was unfolding and that it was directly connected to his son. A few hours later, a file was sent to him. No red stamps, no sensational headline, just familiar scanned documents, project names, timelines, signatures at the bottom of the pages. He opened it very slowly, reading each page carefully, not missing a single detail. The way he read was not that of a curious man, but of someone retracing a map, a road he himself had once walked. James's father did not get angry, nor did he immediately call his son to demand answers, because he knew, if James had not spoken yet, it was not because he was hiding something, but because he was trying to shoulder it on his own. He placed the file down on the desk and sat there in silence for a long time, as if making sure he had seen the entire picture clearly before taking any action. What he saw did not surprise him. It was not a reckless mistake, nor a rash act. They were decisions made under pressure, under deadlines, during a period when people are forced to choose quickly rather than choose correctly. He had been in that position before. He had signed papers which, looking back, he understood that the price was never contained within a single sheet of paper. James's father stood up and walked out onto the balcony. Night had fallen. City lights were beginning to glow, small squares of light appearing in distant windows. Somewhere in this city, his son was trying to keep his family safe in the quietest way possible. He returned to his desk, neatly stacked the file, and set it aside. He did not call James. He did not send a message. Not yet. Before speaking to his son, he needed to know exactly what he could do and where the boundaries lay. That evening, Mr. Hone brought the file and placed it on the dining table when the meal had already gone half cold. Mrs. Huyen noticed immediately, not because of the thickness of the papers, nor because of the heaviness in her husband's expression, but because of the way he set it down, slower and more carefully than usual. She did not ask right away. She simply picked up another piece of food for him, then quietly sat down across from him. Mr. Hone explained the situation very briefly. No embellishment, no exaggeration. He only said that someone had sent him a few old files related to James's former company, that things were not as simple as they had thought, and that James was very likely handling everything on his own. Mrs. Huyen said nothing while he spoke. She lowered her gaze to her hands, her fingers unconsciously turning the ring she had worn for decades. When Mr. Hone finished, the kitchen fell into a very deep silence, the kind of silence that appears only when someone is trying to reorganize everything they have just heard. "He didn't say anything to us?" she asked softly. Mr. Hone shook his head. Mrs. Huyen let out a very light breath, not in surprise, not in reproach. She had long been used to this. James was like his father. The bigger the trouble, the fewer the words. The more dangerous it became, the more he chose silence. "He's like you," she said, her voice slowing. "The more dangerous it is, the quieter he becomes." Mrs. Huyen did not need any more proof to know that James was trying to shoulder everything alone. As a mother, she understood very well the nature of a son who does not want to drag his family into trouble. She also understood that if they waited for James to come to them on his own, it might already be too late. She looked at her husband. Her gaze was not sharp, but there was something firm in it. "I don't need you to solve it for him," she said, "but don't let him collapse from carrying too much." The words struck directly at the deepest place in a father's heart. Mrs. Huyen did not speak of right or wrong, nor did she ask what James had done. To her, at that moment, only one thing mattered. James was in a dangerous place, and her son was there alone. "You know he won't ask for help," she continued, her voice lower. "He's afraid of bothering us, afraid of making us worry. But there are times when parents shouldn't wait for their children to speak. They have to step forward themselves." She stood up and carried the dishes to the sink. Mr. Hone remained seated, watching his wife's back. He understood that this was not unreasonable pressure. It was a mother's instinct, not waiting, not calculating gains and losses, only knowing that if they continued to stand aside, the price to be paid would be far greater. And in that moment, Mr. Hone knew he could not wait any longer. After a night of thinking, Mr. Hone began to act. Quietly, without drawing attention, without making a series of phone calls, he sent only a short message to someone he trusted absolutely, a lawyer who had stood by him through the most difficult years of his career. The message was so brief that, to an outsider, it would not reveal the seriousness behind it. "I need you to review an old set of files. It's quite sensitive." The meeting was arranged discreetly. No large conference room, no secretary. Just the two of them sitting across from each other in a quiet space. Mr. Hone handed over the file without lengthy explanations. The lawyer read very carefully, turning each page, lingering longer over the sections bearing James's signature. The atmosphere in the room grew colder with every page turned. Mr. Hone did not rush him, nor did he ask questions beforehand. He knew that in matters like this, impatience only made things more tangled. What he needed was not reassurance, but the truth. The clearer, the better. The lawyer spoke plainly. There were parts for which James truly bore responsibility. Those signatures could not be erased. They could not be denied. But there were also parts that did not belong to James. Some items had been added later. Some decisions had been made under pressure of deadlines. And there were mistakes that, if handled correctly, could be contained quickly before the situation was pushed too far. Mr. Hone listened without interrupting. In his mind, a boundary gradually became very clear. Which parts James would have to face himself, and which parts could be cut away so his son would not be dragged into an unnecessary spiral. After that meeting, Mr. Hone had the entire file reviewed again. Not to look for a way to evade responsibility, but to understand the structure of the problem precisely. Who was involved, to what extent, and most importantly, whose side time was on. Everything was done in silence. He did not inform James. No phone call, no message. Not because he wanted to hide anything from his son, but because he wanted the situation to be as clear as possible when the two of them finally talked. He wanted to leave his son with room to choose. When everything had been placed under temporary control, Mr. Hone closed the file and set it aside. He looked out the window for a long time, as if weighing the next step he would have to take. Mr. Hone called James and asked to meet at his office. James walked into the familiar room. The atmosphere there was not heavy nor tense as he had imagined. There were no files laid out on the table. Nothing about it felt like a meeting meant to resolve a problem. Just two men sitting across from each other, each carrying his own silence. Mr. Hone poured tea, slid a cup toward James, and then spoke very slowly that he had heard some information related to James's former company. That there were issues that were no longer small, and that if James was planning to handle everything on his own, he did not think that was the best way. James listened without arguing. Mr. Hone did not blame his son, nor did he ask where James had gone wrong. He simply analyzed, very clearly, what James was facing, which parts were responsibilities that could not be avoided, which parts could be clarified, and which parts, if handled the wrong way, could drag the whole family into unnecessary trouble. "You can handle it yourself," he said, "but if you do it alone, you will be very tired." Mr. Hone said that he had no intention of fixing things for James. He did not want his son to rely on his father to escape the consequences. But he also could not stand aside when everything had begun to touch the life of Diep and the child. "I will go with you," he said. "Meet the lawyer, clarify the files, take it one step at a time." Those words did not carry excessive protection. They were simply an offer of support at the right moment. James looked up. The tension in his eyes did not disappear, but something had softened. He understood that his father was not stepping in to take control, but to make sure that he would not be pushed into making the wrong choices out of sheer isolation. Mr. Hone let James sit there for a while longer, as if to make sure his son fully understood what he was facing. Not just the paperwork, not just the legal troubles, but the consequences for an entire small family. When he spoke again, his voice remained steady, neither louder nor slower. "After this situation settles for now," he said, "I want you to think about coming back to work with me." James froze. Not because the words were too surprising, but because of how they were said. Not as an order, and not quite as a simple suggestion either. James looked at his father, and in his eyes something flashed very quickly. Surprise, then caution, then an almost instinctive reflex. "I'm not saying right away. You have time to think," Mr. Hone continued, as if reading his son's thoughts. "But don't make me wait too long." James leaned back in his chair, his hands clasped together. He did not answer immediately. In his mind, images of the past surfaced clearly. Years of working within rigid structures, decisions weighed through multiple layers, and the suffocating feeling he had struggled so hard to escape. "I don't want to go back to that world," James said, his voice low but not hard. "I think I can handle things on my own." Mr. Hone nodded very slightly. "I know," he said, "and I'm not stopping you from doing it yourself." That response made James pause. He had braced himself for an argument, even for pressure. But Mr. Hone did not take that path. "I just want you to understand," he continued, "that freedom isn't always about doing everything alone, especially when you have a family." James fell silent. The surprise now was no longer about the condition being offered, but about this. His father was not trying to take away his choice. He was simply drawing a boundary, one that did not allow James to avoid responsibility, nor to be reckless. "Coming back to work with me," Mr. Hone said slowly, "is not about me controlling you. It's about giving you a safer position during this time, having someone behind you, having clear limits, and so that Diep doesn't have to worry about things you haven't been able to shield yet." That name was spoken very softly, but it struck James harder than any other argument. He lowered his head, looking into the empty space in front of him. For the first time in the conversation, James did not argue in his mind. He did not search for reasons to refuse. Instead, he realized something that surprised even himself. His father was not demanding an answer right away, but the condition he had set was already beginning to shake him. "You can choose," Mr. Hone said finally, his tone still calm. "But if you choose freedom, then you must be sure you're capable of keeping the people you love safe." James looked up. In his eyes now, the initial defensiveness was gone. What remained was something difficult to name, caught between the pride of a man and the responsibility of a husband, a father. He did not say yes, but he did not say no either. And that very silence showed that Mr. Hone's condition had touched a place James could not ignore. James left the house as evening settled in. The road ahead was still familiar, the same old streetlights, the same slow footsteps as every other day, but inside his mind, nothing was standing still anymore. For the first time in a long while, James no longer felt like he was running away or struggling to hold everything up on his own. Someone was standing beside him, not to pull him in a certain direction, but to make him see more clearly the cost of every choice. He thought about freedom, and he thought about safety. He thought about Diep, about the small house, about those evenings that seemed so ordinary, yet could be lost if he made one wrong step. His father's condition was not a chain binding him. It felt more like a boundary placed at the right moment, so James could understand that from now on, every decision he made would no longer concern only himself. James had not given an answer yet, but in his heart, one thing was already clear. If giving up a part of his freedom was the price to keep the people he loved safe and at peace, then it was no longer a loss. It was a choice. Somewhere else, Diep was still waiting for him to come home. She did not know everything that was unfolding. She only sensed that, from today on, James's path had turned in a different direction, quieter, yet heavier. And the remaining question was no longer whether James could overcome this trouble, but this, whether he could keep Diep by his side as the cost of safety continued to grow. If you've ever had to stand between your own freedom and the peace of your family, leave a like as a sign of shared understanding. And if you want to know which path James will choose, subscribe to continue walking alongside him and Diep in the next episode.